I think it's safe to say that Apple Music has had a pretty bad reputation when it comes to recommending new songs and artists, especially when compared to other music streaming platforms such as Spotify. However, there are a few hidden tricks and features that you can use to better discover new music and artists on Apple Music, which I'll be going over in today's video. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Okay, so the main way that you'll usually discover new music on Apple Music is through the homepage. It's usually the first tab that loads up when you open the Apple Music app, and it can be found at the bottom left of the screen if you're on mobile. And essentially, if I scroll around here, you'll see that we have a bunch of different albums Apple Music is recommending I listen to based off content I recently listened to. And so you can either listen to the full suggested album, or sometimes if I'm feeling a bit lazy, I might just listen to the most popular songs in the album, which are indicated by this little grey dot to the left of the title. However, if we go back out to the homepage and scroll down to this Made For You section, we'll essentially see Apple Music's version of the mixed playlist that you might be more familiar with services such as Spotify. Essentially, each mix contains 25 different songs, which refresh once a week. So the favorites playlist essentially plays back songs you've either liked and or listened to a lot in the past, and that refreshes every Tuesday. It's essentially like Spotify's repeat rewind playlist. Secondly, there's the Get Up mix, which is a bit more of an upbeat playlist that refreshes every Monday. Then there's the Chill mix, which, as the name suggests, plays more relaxing music every Sunday. Then there's the Music mix, which plays new releases from artists that you either follow or artists which Apple Music thinks that you'll like. Essentially, think of it as being like the release radar on Spotify. And finally, Apple Music have recently added this heavy rotation mix that updates daily, which contains songs that you've been listening to a lot recently. Again, it's quite similar to Spotify's on repeat playlist. And for some users, you might also see a friends mix, which refreshes every Thursday that shows you what your friends are listening to. I currently don't have any friends at the moment, so I can't exactly show you what this playlist looks like, but if any of your friends do have similar music tastes to you, then it's worth checking out what they're listening to and adding some of their songs to your playlists. But that's about as far as Apple Music goes with algorithmically generated mixed playlists. And so the second most common way that I usually discover new music on Apple Music is by using the stations feature. So essentially, if we go back into the home tab, under the Made For You section, there's another section called Stations For You. And you'll see that we have these different stations named by artists. And if I click on, say, the Drake station, Apple Music is essentially going to infinitely auto-generate random songs that sound similar to Drake. And if we go to the queue, you can usually see one or two songs that are going to come up next. And the nice thing about stations compared to mixed playlists is that you don't have to wait for them to refresh every week. So let's say the Drake tab didn't show up in the Stations For You section. If instead I head into search and I quickly search for Drake's profile, if I tap on these three dots here at the top, I can essentially create a Drake station just as before. And I can listen to songs that sound like Drake for as long as I want. I'm not capped to 25 songs that only update once per week, and I can do this for any artist and song as well. So if I go into a random playlist that I've created, let's say I go into the pop bangers, let's select Brutal by Olivia Rodrigo, just for argument's sake. So if I tap on these three ellipses here, I can choose to create a station out of this song, which will play similar songs that fit the vibe to the current one. And Spotify also has a similar stations feature as well, if you've ever used it. But what I like about Apple Music's take on stations is that they're infinitely generated, so you can theoretically listen to these stations for forever. On top of that, we also have stations by genre and mood as well. So you'll notice that in the Stations For You section earlier, there were two stations labeled Heartbreak and Love, which have been there since Valentine's Day for some reason. And essentially these play songs that are related to those categories. And the way that you can find more stations like this is by heading into search, and you'll see a bunch of different music genres. And if I click into one of them, let's say R&B here, and scroll down to the very bottom, we have a bunch of R&B stations like classic soul, funk, R&B and hip hop that we can listen to. Similarly, if we head out and go into pop and scroll down, you'll find things like the hit station, 2000 hits, hits from the 2020s, and similarly in the African section, you'll have an Afrobeat station. And finally, we also have personalized stations, which can be found in the same stations for you section like before. And you'll see here that I've got two personalized stations. The first is called Your Name Station. So in my case, it's the Sukhdeep Singh station. And essentially this plays a mix of songs that you've either liked or listened to a lot in the past, or which Apple Music thinks that you'll like. So it's a mix of past songs and new songs. It's a lot like Spotify's new AI DJ feature, but without the annoying DJ guy talking in the background. And then there's the Discovery Station, which recommends just new artists and or songs that you've not listened to before. So if you're ever feeling bored during the week, let's say you've listened to all of the Made For You weekly playlists because you're a music pro, then you can just throw on the Discovery Station and quickly discover some new bangers. And honestly, this is my favorite way to discover new music because I found so many new artists and songs just using this approach. However, if you're not a fan of algorithmically generated playlists or stations and you want your music recommendations to feel a bit more personal to you, then Apple Music actually has a number of humanly curated stations and playlists. So if we head into the radio tab at the bottom here, Apple Music actually runs 3 live radio stations with different shows on each station 24/7. So for example, one of my favorite live shows is Party Starters with Rebecca Judd, which airs on Apple Music Hits every Friday. And similarly, if we head into the Browse tab, you can also find a bunch of different playlists by mood or genre. And these playlists have been curated and vetted by people who actually work at Apple Music. So occasionally I will just shuffle through some of these to get some song recommendations. I guess one downside is that these playlists tend to be quite mainstream when it comes to recommending well-known artists, but they do have some niche categories like this indie R&B playlist, which I do listen to a lot. Okay, so the next way to discover new music on Apple Music is to use the suggested songs feature that comes built in every playlist that you create. So if I go into this playlist I've created here, which composes mostly of American rap, and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that Apple Music has suggested a list of 5 different songs based on the music that's in this playlist, which I can preview just by tapping, and they'll usually give me like a 30-second preview of the song. If I don't like it, I can go on to the next one, and if I like the next one, I can just tap this plus icon here, and that will automatically add the song to my playlist. And if in the off chance I don't like any of the suggestions, I can just tap this refresh icon here at the top, and Apple Music will suggest a list of 5 different songs. Okay, so the final way to discover music on Apple Music is not an approach that's necessarily unique to Apple Music itself, but it's essentially to take a look at artists that you're already following and to see which artists are similar to them. So for example, if I go into artists and let's select Usher, for example, if I scroll down to the bottom of his profile, I'll have a list of artists who Apple Music considers to be similar to Usher. And from that, I might discover that Mario is a similar artist and begin listening to his songs. And if I scroll down to the bottom of Mario's page, I can see that Trey Songz is a similar artist to him. And so I might browse through his Essentials playlists to see if he's an artist that resonates with me. And you can adopt a similar approach to collaborations as well. So if, for example, I was listening to Too Good by Drake, which is an absolute banger, I might also notice that this song features a guy called Sampha, who I've not heard of. Obviously, I have heard of Sampha because he bangs. So I'd type in Sampha in the search bar and I'd listen to some of his Essentials to see if he's another artist that I might like. And yeah, you should totally consider listening to Sampha if you haven't already. But yeah, essentially I can scroll down to find other artists like James Blake and Frank Ocean who are similar to Sampha, and I can then discover their music by listening to their top songs or their Essentials playlists or their Essential albums. So those are just the main ways that I like to discover new songs and artists using Apple Music. Obviously, whilst Apple Music does excel when it comes to audio quality with spatial audio, I still think it lacks when it comes to music discovery, especially when you compare it to Spotify. But hey, that's the beauty of having options. And if you are curious about how these two music streaming giants stack up against each other, especially when it comes to music discovery, you can check out my Apple Music versus Spotify video that I'll link somewhere in the description. Consider leaving a like if you guys found this video helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.